let's talk what I would call the absolute ridiculous scenes that we've seen unfold today, where we've seen scores of protesters linking arms to laughably create what they call a human chain to try and stop asylum seekers being moved to the Bibby Stockholm. Joining me now live is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Good evening to you, Mark. Thanks for joining us. Can you bring our viewers up to speed with what on earth was supposed to be happening and what actually did end up happening in the end?
Well, finally, in terms of a breaking news development, we can confirm that almost 10 hours after this protest began outside this hotel in Peckham in southeast London, it has finally ended. The road has been cleared and the police have left the scene. The Metropolitan Police have confirmed that 45 protesters have been arrested. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Adi Adelekan, has said, "It saddens me to confirm that a number of his officers have been injured in these protests and violent scuffles." He said not seriously injured, but still injured in the line of duty as they tried over many hours to reason with these protesters to move out of the roadway, to let that bus on its way. But we can confirm as well that the Home Office have had to abandon what they were planning, which was to remove a group of about 7 individuals from that hotel, which has been requisitioned for asylum seeker purposes. They were removing 7 people from there to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Dorset. Because of the scenes, because of the violence that erupted there, that has now been abandoned. I'm sure they will try on another day to remove people, but it is clearly becoming an issue for the authorities, because not just this, Michelle, we got reports as well from a briefing that I attended about the immigration raids that were taking place to round up people for deportation to Rwanda, that a number of spontaneous protests popped up at various sites linked to those arrests as well. This is becoming an issue. It's going to be something that the authorities will have to get a grip of and grapple with in the weeks ahead, because it's going to become more of an issue as we get closer to the date for these first flights leaving for Rwanda.
Goodness me. Thank you very much, Mark, for that update. I am itching to let rip about what I think about that. I am appalled by it, but I'll let you go first, Kelvin Mackenzie. I'll be polite.
First of all, how shocking it is that our police officers should be beaten up in this way. A number of them, we've just heard, have been injured by these. Well, I presume they're thugs, but they've been arrested now, so we'll have to see what the court makes of them. But the reality is that those police officers were, in fact, conducting what the law is.
I just want to interrupt whilst you're talking as well, because I can't help but notice, I've got my glasses on, nothing wrong with my eyesight now, and I can see a number of concealed faces there. There was a fellow a second ago with a scarf up. People were concealing their faces. I'm sure I can see like that bandana thing, the burgundy thing at the back. She just pulled up again. I thought you weren't even allowed to do that now in these kind of circumstances. Well, anyway, I digress. Carry on.
I didn't know that, but you know, they're there to stop what the law of the land is. We want those people out. They are illegal currently, and when they're in Rwanda, they can have their asylum applications tested. And I am sick and tired of seeing a small group acting against the law. And what also concerns me, beyond this tonight, is what's happening in our universities.
Look at how careful they are, to conceal their faces. Are you watching what I'm watching, everybody?
Yeah, well, hold on. Is that any worse than the Deliveroos you see wandering around, driving around London all the time, which I see a load of those wearing black across their faces? Why is that? Well, I presume because they're illegals as well.
No, hang on a second, Kelvin. I mean, obviously, there's no one from Deliveroo to defend themselves against that, but a lot of people are delivery drivers. They are actually bombing around on mopeds, so they would have had, some kind of head covering underneath their helmet or whatever. So let's not conflate issues.
Well, my point really is that the idea that police officers are being beaten up while carrying out the law of the land is completely unacceptable. And these people clearly are not the innocent little students just hanging around fresh out of school and, oh, we've got to act on behalf of these migrants. We must not allow them to fly to Rwanda. These are people who wanted to fight. How shocking is that?
Yeah, but I have to make it clear as well, they're not even going to Rwanda. So all of these people have busied themselves with blockading this coach today. You're not actually trying to prevent deportation to Rwanda. These people were going to the Bibby Stockholm, a perfectly reasonable accommodation option for people. Where are you on this, Kerry?
Well, I've always been very sympathetic to people making horrendous journeys across the world in search of a better life and found them quite inspiring. But this, I feel, I'm not in support of these protesters.
You find it inspiring to illegally enter a country?
People wanting a better life, absolutely.
Would you find it inspiring if people were pushing through the e-gates at Heathrow Airport to storm the country without the passport?
But they're not, Michelle, are they? The problem here is protesters who don't respect migrants as aspirant human beings. They treat them as victims. And that's about the students themselves wanting to appear super compassionate do-gooders. It's all virtue signalling. It's not about a serious debate. And I wouldn't take the sides of either those who demonise people who want a better life, wrongly calling them asylum seekers quite often, because often they're not, or those who deny them agency, like these protesting students. I think that's both bad news and doesn't help us. But the government has been hoisted by its own petard by making such a deal out of its fairly hopeless, ridiculously expensive Rwanda policy. And these kind of protesters aren't offering any solutions for the real problems people are worried about, which is the cost of these hotels, which is mad, and the fact that people are getting in these dangerous small boats, because we have a government completely incapable of persuading France to allow boats to be turned around. And people then to apply to come here legally rather than spending thousands on getting in a dinghy.
I just want to remind everybody of a story that I'm certainly familiar with, and you might be as well. You might remember the scenes. It was an aeroplane. I think it was about 2018 or thereabouts, and so there was a guy that was getting deported, and he was on this plane getting deported. And what happened next, everybody? All of the do-gooders got involved. Lots of fellow passengers started getting involved, getting out their mobile phones, saying you're treating this fellow absolutely inhumanely. You're separating him from his family. This is barbaric treatment, so on and so forth. What happened next? They were successful. This fellow was offloaded. But you know what? Do you know why he was being deported, everybody? Because he was convicted. He was a gang rapist. The fella had raped a 16-year-old. So all of these do-gooders... round of applause to you, because what you actually achieved was a gang rapist being kept back in the country when he should have been kicked out so fast his feet didn't even touch the floor. I can tell you, right, we are in a situation, Kelvin, where many people, and I do need to just represent the other side of this, because people will say this is inhumane. I've heard people describe, actually, it's akin to human trafficking, what the Home Office are currently doing, picking up people, taking them perhaps against their will, because the asylum accommodation is given out on a no-choice basis. So wherever you're told to go, then that's where you've got to go. So people on the other side of this argument will say that's inhumane, it's cruel, it's essentially human trafficking, and that goes against the human rights of those individuals.
Well, I'm not quite sure what percentage of society actually believe. I mean, there are people who believe that the moon's made of blue cheese. That is not an argument to argue against a parliamentary law and to say this is what we're going to do. Our elected representatives say you are going to go to Rwanda and therefore they will go. But while we're talking about this, we're talking about hundreds more, biggest number this year, who have just arrived on the boats, literally within the last hour or so. We're talking about a whole load of university issues connected with Gaza. We're watching police officers being beaten up. We're watching police officers being hit by machetes. We have a societal issue right now where law and order on many different fronts are not being followed by mainly younger people. And I think we need to have a reaction similar to UCLA and to Columbia. And also, I am appalled that our officers have to be beaten up to carry out the will of the people. How is that possible?
Well, as well, you could knock me down with a feather, because I thought it was only the so-called... It was the far right, so-called, that were the violent protesters. I can't get my head around why, if these people are so proud of their actions and they think that they are doing the right thing, I cannot understand for the life of me. Like, look at that there. You can see that person really trying hard to conceal their face. If you're proud of your actions and you think you're on the right side of history and you think and you believe, because I don't doubt that these people are passionate, that they think that they're doing the right thing, why conceal your face then? Why not be proud and bold about your actions? And I would love to find one of those people from those years ago that managed to get that asylum seeker off the plane and stop the deportation. I'd love to talk to one of those people and ask them, now that we understand the actual real situation of that, i.e. he was a gang rapist, how do you now feel about halting that deportation? And if indeed that guy had gone on to rape somebody else, what would your conscience feel like? Because if that was me and I'd got that fellow off the plane and he'd then hurt somebody subsequently, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And I keep coming back to, I mean, I can quote some of these protesters, actually. One of them, he says, he went down to watch the protest. He lives next door to the hotel where these fellas are currently housed. He said, I don't mind them living in this house, in this hotel. They just live here. He thinks, it's basically inhumane. Someone else says what's going on is horrific and inhumane. It's also been declared immoral and unlawful. We need to stand up for these people who can't stand up and defend themselves, because all of this legislation is specifically targeting them. But do you think this is like the first step to mob rule? Because if you let groups of people dictate your policy, i.e. this deportation, it's not a deportation, sorry, this transfer to the Bibby Stockholm hasn't gone ahead today because of these protesters, and probably it'll happen again tomorrow and the next time and the next time. Do you worry a little bit that a mob can kind of thwart policy like that?
Well, I do, in the sense that, but I do recognise these people don't give a toss about democracy at all. And that's a major problem. And as I was saying earlier, they really do, and you've just reinforced it with those statements that they've come out with, they really do see asylum seekers or migrants, which most of them are seeking a better life, rather than being persecuted, they see them as victims. And if they recognise them as human beings, which they don't, that have done this incredible journey across the world, they'd also know that these are people who don't think that the Bibby Stockholm is some sort of hellhole. That's of their own, these students making. So they are creating this, these victim migrants and treating them like children, which I think is really objectionable and demeaning.
I can tell you now, there's some people in this country, homeless people and whatnot, I think they'd give their right arm, actually, to have free accommodation to the standard of Bibby Stockholm. I can tell you that. If you are one of those protesters and for some reason you're watching this tonight, do get in touch and tell me why you don't have the chops to actually show your face if you're so proud of the action that you're taking. And also, on Jubes & Co, I don't just like to give you problems, I do like to give you solutions. So all of these people that were chanting refugees welcome, I've got a great idea for you. Why don't we try and set up, and you can already voluntarily overpay extra tax. If you're in the camp of refugees welcome, and I'm not knocking that, it's a perfectly valid place to be, why don't you say to yourselves, you know what, let's pay a voluntary amount of tax. So all of us that are in favour of putting people in hotels and all the rest of it, you guys can chip in a bit more and you can help fund that if you're so in favour of refugees welcome and all the rest of it. I think it's a great idea. Win-win. You get what you want, they get what they want, and everyone who doesn't agree with that isn't paying for it.
Well, why don't
Good idea or not?
Why don't we also, when they finally appear in court and get hopefully convicted, why don't we put them on the same plane and send them out to Rwanda as well?
Well, you say that at this rate. I mean, I bet there's a few people in society thinking to themselves, why don't I lose my passport, go to Calais, get in a dinghy and volunteer to be sent to Rwanda? I'll take the £3,000 and the free living costs. I bet there's a few people that have had that thought.